Hey guys.
Good morning.
Buenos días. ¿Cómo están? Bueno, el día de hoy vamos a estar Marixa y yo hablando en inglés porque estamos con un invitado súper especial, nuestro primer invitado, que es Chris Little with Parkway Law. So we want to say thank you to Chris for coming and being our first guest on our podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we are so happy to have you here.
I appreciate that.
Yes. So Chris is our preferred closing attorney. He's awesome. Chris, let's tell the people a little bit more about how long you've been in the business. What is it that a closing attorney does?
That's a really easy question. Thank you guys again for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it. The closing attorney's role is we kind of shepherd the transaction, right? So every real estate transaction involves a piece of dirt, right? And somebody has to own that piece of dirt and then transfer it to somebody else. That's the basics of real estate. So Georgia requires attorneys to be a part of that, and that's for good reason, right? There's a lot of complicated title issues and things that can come up in a closing. And so Georgia trusts that with attorneys, and, so that's our role is basically to make sure that that buyer gets that property, that seller conveys that property free and clear of any liens or judgments or anything like that in fee simple. Together with that then becomes our responsibility to the lenders, right? So then there's other aspects to the closing process where we have to intersect and be a part of the process with the lender. So there's the title piece. We also represent lenders in the transactions in Georgia, so they are our clients, right? And then the third piece are the buyers and the sellers. We owe a fiduciary responsibility to them as attorneys. And so we have to make sure the title is clear and conveys. We make sure that the loan process goes through and that lender has first lien position. And then we make sure that buyer and seller walk away happy selling the house and purchasing the house, which is what they signed the contract for in the beginning. There's lots of moving parts in that process, but that's the basics. We have to kind of hold the transaction together. There's lots of moving parts. I always call closings a controlled crash, right? But it's landing that plane as softly as you can. But it takes a lot of coordination to get a closing to the table.
I was just going to say that, like, a lot of people, I think, do not really pay attention at the fact that you guys are like the there's a word for it that I'm looking for, but I can't think about it right now. But you guys are, let's say, at the ceremony, right? Like, you guys are officiating this wonderful ceremony,
Correct.
Which is getting the buyers to get the keys to their house and the sellers to sell the property and get their money, right? But behind that, there's like so many, like, I don't know. I have a 9-year-old, so I'm thinking Minions, right?
Yeah. But you're right. There's a whole group of them behind there, right? And so that's exactly it. The closing ceremony itself is what the buyers and sellers see. They may have spoken to our office or gotten some emails and things like that. But you're right. The ceremony is exactly what they see. But yes, there is a ton going on behind. Lots of stuff.
Right. And so, Chris, tell us a little bit about, like, for, Parkway Law, how long have you guys been in business? And, so that people understand a little bit.
Part of it,
How you start this?
Yeah, the me part of it is I didn't answer your first question. So I graduated law school in 2000. So I guess this is 23 years of doing, and I've done real estate closings the entire time. Worked standard like you guys. I'm an entrepreneur, right? And so I worked for a company for 2-3 years, and then figured out how to do it on my own, and then just started my own law firm, and then expanded to multiple offices, things like that. But the nuts and bolts haven't changed, right? We still have to produce a good product, which is that closing for buyers, sellers, agents, and lenders. So the assignment definitely has not changed in the last 20 years. So how we do it has. Like, we've got a lot more tools now, technology. My staff, they can work from anywhere. When I'm in a closing, I have to pick which one of our 14 communication platforms to use nowadays, right? But in 2004, I would have to get up from the closing table, go talk to somebody, get some stuff printed, and come back. Now I just sit there and Teams them from the table. And so leveraging that technology, we do it, throughout the process to make it smoother, our communication. So y'all know it, right? You get the automated text and emails and things like that to keep all the parties I guess, knowing the status of their transaction. This is the biggest transaction of their life.
Yeah,
and so
exactly.
we take our role in that, big. Like, it's a big part of that process. And so we want to communicate with them. The technology on that side makes it awesome. And so then the closing experience, I can do stuff from the table, and it's, anyways, yeah. Yes.
Yes,
Not
you guys
much-
are awesome, and that's why we love you guys.
Yeah.
Especially because not just you, but as I mentioned, your whole team is so amazing. Everything just runs so smoothly.
Right.
Now, what made you get into real estate law?
So that's a funny story. It's actually a funny story. So I graduated from Furman University in 1996. Parents paid for school. Everything was great. And told my dad I was going to go get a job and that I wasn't going to go to grad school. And went to work. Got my first car insurance bill, right? I was working at a law firm making, I don't know, $8-9 an hour or whatever, but that was fine because that could pay, my bar tabs and Wendy's.
Yes.
But then I got a car insurance bill for like $1,000 or something. I mailed it to my dad, and like a week later, it came back with a little note that said, "This is yours now. I told you take your to school." So I looked around. I went to work. I looked around. I was like, "Man, these are some cool cars around here. And I think I'll go to law school." I was always good at school, so I wasn't the guy that always wanted to be a lawyer. So the law that we do, it is law, right? It's title and things like that, but we're not doing litigation and things like that.
Yeah.
So, and it's an easy practice to kind of have on your own. So I worked at a big fancy law firm. It was great, but I watched those guys and saw the economics and how things worked there, and realized that I want to be the front minion, not in the back.
Yeah.
And so, and moving to Georgia, I found that real estate was a very good area of practice to kind of start your own and be an entrepreneur like you guys. I love that the harder I work, the better I do, and I love that. So that's how I ended up being a real estate attorney. Is that and it's fun, right? I am not a litigator. I'm not a criminal attorney. It lets me. I'm a people person, so the closing ceremony, I get to sit there and hang out and talk to people. Like, that's what I do all day long.
Yeah, that's a great story, actually.
Yeah.
I would like to know, how many offices do you have in Georgia?
Yeah, so in Georgia we've got 9, stretching from the farthest north would be Kennesaw all the way down to Warner Robins. So Macon's become a big market, Warner Robins for us. Gwinnett, Alpharetta, Stockbridge, Buckhead. We got a new fancy Buckhead office. I like it.
Yeah.
Yes.
We haven't been to that one.
No,
we have
to go.
Check
Yeah.
that one out. It's pretty cool. So the parking's not bad, and it's easy to get to in Buckhead. I don't know how we tripped over it, but anyway.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep. So, and that's for providing services to you guys and our clients and buyers and sellers. We want to be convenient for them.
And so when you were saying that, you love the closings now, we've talked a little bit in our podcast about those situations where, let's say, agents get like in their feelings and they don't necessarily love working with the co-agent, and they get to the closing table, and here you are not knowing what's going on.
Yes.
And you walk into these situations where it's so unhappy. Now tell us, like, how do you guys handle things like that? Like, what has happened?
Well,
give us a little.
It's always
juice.
a case-by-case basis,
Yeah,
right? So what
it's different every time.
Right, and what I didn't know came with my law degree was a PhD in therapy as well. So I ended up becoming a therapist. So it's experience, right? A closing attorney is different than a litigator, right? A litigator just sits there and does laws and whatever, but I have to know people. And so the exact scenario, we've all heard of them, right? Split closings, things like that, or something goes wrong at the table. You just have to know how to handle them. And so it's experience, right? So if it's me at the closing table, there's very specific thing, pull somebody out of the room, but then how do you do that? And it's just little tricks and things that you learn over time. But it's just handling the situation people. So I understand. I do it all day, every day. And that's what I drill into my staff. I'm like, you guys, this is the biggest transaction for the buyer and seller involved. And again, for the agents, loan officers, and us, we do it all day, every day. So understanding that sometimes that could be a highly charged environment. I mean, it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if somebody has an opinion, you've got to be cognizant of that. So anyways, it's my experience. I can handle the situations and people. I mean, usually it shows itself with divorces, right? They want to split closing, and then the exes start fighting through the wall or whatever. We've had that happen before.
What is one story you can Can you remember that you can...
Like the craziest?
Yeah, the craziest that you have.
Let's see here. So
If you remember one.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, right? And so, we had the ex-husband. Took a lot of work, right? And there's probably details you shouldn't know. However, but you can see when they're exes, sometimes we'll say spite gets involved, and it's always the case. And so we had a closing where we had 3 rooms going this time. We had the buyers in one, wife in one, future ex-husband in the other. So we had to run all the rooms, and so got it all done until ex-husband. He waited because he knew what he was doing. He just got up and walked out, didn't sign the deed, and completely let that deal die. And so,
oh my God! At the table?
At the table, he killed it. God. Buyers had stuff.
But he would lose money.
They're moving.
Like he would be open for. Aren't they? If the seller doesn't sign at closing, aren't they like?
Correct.
Open to being sued?
He was open to a lot. So there's he had a contract with the buyer. So and then the court action told him that he had to. So the problem that we run into, I don't know if y'all want to dive into this, but it's the difference between law and practicality, right? And so a specific performance lawsuit is a lot to do and go through. Generally, we don't see them too often because buyers, they get upset, but they get their earnest money back. Sometimes they'll go back after for inspections and appraisals and things like that, but they just
it'll cost more to do it than what they'll get back.
Move on to a different house. And on the seller side, I don't know what happened because she would have to take him to court for contempt.
Got it. Okay.
Should. I know that we never closed it. So, but it was nuts. I mean, it was so in that environment, right? So I'm trying to, shield the buyers from that crazy, right? So that buyer's agent and the buyers had nothing to do with all of that. So we had them in the far room, and then we had an empty room, and then we had, but the point being, you have to do little things like that, and that's just the one-off. Most of the closings.
And those are the things that like people do not see from our world, right? Because we show like, let's say real estate attorneys, real estate agents, we show like the glamorous part, right?
Yeah.
And we've talked a little bit about it, and that's the point of this podcast, to kind of like get down the nitty gritty and like what is it really that we do. People don't really see that, right? And those are things that people do not see, like that, like just that situation, like for your office, since we're talking about it takes a whole team, right? So if it takes a whole team for one closing where we have, buyer, seller, agent, attorney, then we're also talking about a whole other group of people to do those other 3 rooms. So it takes up time, money. Like you do it to accommodate, but these are all things that, people don't see.
And I think that's why partnerships like ours work, right, with competent people. So we both can go off and do our jobs and then trust that it'll be handled. So that situation, not to name names or whatever, but there was an agent who knew how that relation was the entire time and knew that was a possibility. You guys could probably give more information on that. I don't know how they should have involved the buyer earlier in that process because this caught them by surprise, the other side.
Right. And I mean, realistically, when we're doing a sale when it's in divorce, like the buyer has to know, like it's a special condition that they have, like they're supposed to know in the special, in the property disclosure.
Yep. So like I did all my stuff and handled it as best I could, but
but there's nothing they can do. So when it comes to divorce, when a person, like in that situation, they own a property, right? And they bought the property while they were still married, but only one person's on title. Yep. Do they still have to split it?
So then the after acquired property is the marital residence is a part of the marital estate, and there's an automatic stay on the sale. So the court freezes any activity on that. Georgia's not a community property state, so the owner is still the person on title. However, the concept of the marital estate, that house is a part of the whole thing. Cars, whatever, whatever, all, investment accounts and all of that. So there's a freeze on that until the court decides. But then that's when the negotiation happens in the divorce proceeding, the settlement agreement, who does what with the house. So for us, we want that agreement to determine where the money goes, right? So we have to comply with that court order in order to issue our title insurance policy. So that's why we have to dive into, divorce, probate, bankruptcy. I have to know a lot of other law, right, to do the real estate law. So it is lawyerly, but it's also very people-based as well.
And when it comes to, is that when you guys are doing like the investigation of the title that you guys do? Because from what I have understood from our experiences, not only do you guys dive into like the title but you guys also dive into the buyer and into the seller, right? So like if there's any liens and stuff to the person.
Correct. So from the buyer side, yeah, if the buyer has a tax lien, judgments, anything like that, the minute they take title to that property, they attach. Now in Georgia, if you acquire the property with a purchase money note, there's a statutory priority. They give priority to that mortgage lien first and its subordinates. It's some technical stuff. So if the buyer does have liens, sometimes we have to disclose them, sometimes we don't. Tax liens we do, IRS liens. But other than that, it doesn't really concern the lenders too much because their lien priority is higher than the other liens. So, but for sellers, sellers, absolutely, that's exactly what we're looking for. So the way we discover, our title exams can show divorce and probate. We also try to make our process easy for sellers. We have online information sheets. So then we ask the questions there about bankruptcy, divorce, probate, things like that.
So the liens can be in a property and also in the person.
To the person.
To the
as
person.
Well. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So it attaches to the property. It follows the person and then grabs onto whatever property they own.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you remember that closing? I always
I just remember. That's why I asked him, because the lien it was on him, no any property or something like that. Yeah.
So it was during COVID, and we had a client, and it was far. I don't remember where it was, but we had a client. Great,
Stockbridge.
You remember? Yeah.
We have an
remember.
office there.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't with your attorneys, but we actually went to the closing table. We closed. We signed. Everything, but the seller was in France, and it was during COVID. So the seller was in France, and the U.S. Embassy was closed for a while. So then we had to go ahead and sign again, but they mailed the papers like 2 weeks later. Anyway.
No, and also they sent it to Georgia, but they.
Oh yes, the country.
But
Georgia.
the country of Georgia.
Wow.
So that was like, what's happening?
It was crazy.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And then we got to the second closing, and they found out that the buyer had a lien.
Buyer.
Yeah, and they already had the keys for 2 weeks. Thankfully, they had not moved in,
Right.
but they already had the keys and everything.
Did the buyer have a loan?
No, he had like some kind of lien that was under his name, but it was like
Something
big.
that yeah.
that he couldn't take off like right then and there. And we didn't, like, we closed, but we didn't close.
That's interesting.
He had to go back
Was that
and get back the
Yeah.
keys.
Wow, was that a cash transaction?
No.
Oh, okay. So there was a lender involved. Then. Yeah. So, and again, it's up to the lender, right? So we disclose it and we tell the lender that you'll be in first priority, but for their underwriting, they may not just want somebody with a big tax obligation or something like that.
No, and apparently they had not disclosed it yet. And anyway, it was like a whole thing. But it was.
But
that was the only crazy story
that
that I
was
have
so-
ever had. That I'm like, I got to the closing table,
So
literally
weird.
closed, and didn't get.
No, it happened. I mean,
closing.
crazy one-offs like that happen about once a year or so, where we have to unravel something nuts, or a lender didn't credit a payoff to somebody's account, things like that. So
I have heard of stories of like where someone, let's say, takes ownership or has ownership of a property and sells it like 3 times in one day.
yeah, we see that a lot, wholesaling with investors.
So they like try to sell it to different people
Yeah, I mean, the concept of that would be
because it's not recorded yet, right?
well, it's real estate investing, right? Buy low, sell high. That's the concept. They just do it fast on the same day for a smaller margin. But yeah, it's 2 quick closings.
No, I mean like, okay.
Okay.
So I'm the seller, right? I have a property, and I go to different law firms, and I sell it to
3
different
times.
buyers.
Yeah. So then yes, that can happen. That happened. This was 2001. It was probably, I don't know, maybe 6 months into my first 6 months of real estate practice. Yeah, that's
You're like, why did I get into this?
Right. Well, no, it was I was 25 or 6 at the time, and just closing refinances. Didn't know what I was doing, just doing closings, and turned out that I didn't even know what a title claim was at the time, but we had one come in like 6 months later, and then looking at it, that this person it's taking advantage of the gap. So that's exactly right. So when we do our title searches, we can only see good through 2 or 3 weeks ago. So the Wild West can occur during that gap period. And so this lady had refinanced, did cash out refis, and this is 2001. So, the online stuff, the information, the way machines talk to each other wasn't the same back then.
Right.
So she was able to apply for mortgages with 5 different companies and get underwritten through 5 different companies. So she refied her house 5 times in a 3-day period, and then there's a rescission period. So then there was a gap, and so anyways, point being, she got $1 million out and went, and it just so happened the company I was working for at the time was on top of their recording, and so their security interest got recorded first.
Oh, thankfully.
So,
Okay.
Yeah, but the other ones had to take in insurance handles all of that. But yeah, that was a little bit.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Now, it's crazy stories. Again, these are the parts of real estate that people don't understand, the liability that we all have, even because this is the biggest investment that you're making to date. Like, it's thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars that, though you're not giving hundreds of thousands of dollars most of the time, right? It's still the lender is putting in a huge, and that's why when I hear clients say like, oh, or even other, colleagues that they'll say, it's getting so hard to get a loan now.
Right.
And I'm like, but that's for the protection of the buyer, because these things, they are asking for paperwork and they are asking for verifications and all this stuff, but that's to protect you as the consumer to not default on your loan, that they're giving you a loan that you can't afford, because that was something that they weren't doing back then in 2001 to 2005.
No, one of my taglines, right, is we're big enough to matter but small enough to care. And so it's making sure that we understand that we're taking care of the biggest asset somebody's going to buy. We're taking care of, we have 20, 30, $50 million in our escrow account at all times of lenders' money, things like that. So we are shepherds. We have to take our role seriously and take care of the people and the money. So what we do is serious. It seems fun, and then you go to the closing. People are
really
popping
serious.
champagne and taking pictures with the fun signs, and that's, we love that. We want that to be a part of the experience for the consumer. But yes, there's serious work going on behind there with some high dollar.
And the thing is that you do your job so well that that's what can occur at closings. Happiness, champagne, dancing, because that's the thing about our jobs. I think that the agents that do their job well, their clients have no idea of the fires that we've had to put out in the back.
And that's where our teamwork comes in, right? And so we work well together to shield the client. We're the professionals, right? We do this all day, every day. We give them the information they need when they need it and how they need it.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And how
So
being the big one.
Yes. Yeah. How is the,
don't make them stress or something like that.
Right. But that's kind of, again, that's a big thing for us and for me. So how I present the information. If I just send out an email that says, hey, we got a title issue, we're going to have some crazy, I'm going to start getting phone calls from sellers and listing. So again, it's just being responsible with our role and knowing what we do and how we do it reflects on our clients and again, the experience for the consumer.
Well, Chris, can you talk about a little bit of the title insurance, like how it works, what it is? Because most of the buyers doesn't know, and they
they just see it as an extra fee.
Right. And so for us, that's the whole transaction revolves around issuing the title insurance policy either to the buyer or the lender or both, right? So that's us declaring, saying, okay, this title is clear and can be conveyed fee simple to this buyer. So the whole transaction revolves around that. Now, once you get into there, if there's a loan, every lender requires a loan policy. So that protects the lender's security interest in the title to the property. So the reason for that would be they don't want exactly what I was talking about earlier, the priority. We're guaranteeing to them that they are in first lien position so that if they have to foreclose, they don't have to worry about any of the other liens. That same protection is also offered to buyers, right? And so we issue policies to buyers usually on 90-95% of our closings, because it's a simple analysis. Somebody's paying $5,600,000 or something and spend an extra $1,500 to protect it. Usually that's, especially if you've already spent that much money on inspections and appraisals, why not spend that to guarantee the title?
We always advise our clients to get title insurance.
Right. And the claims that happen are usually small. judgment here, judgment there. The policy pays out $6,000, $8,000, $10,000, whatever, but the buyer doesn't have to deal with it. But the worst case scenarios are the worst case scenarios where what we're seeing a lot now is absentee seller fraud, right? So we were kind of discussing earlier about that gap period. Well, also there's a new scam where out-of-state scammers are figuring out who owns properties free and clear. Usually it's raw land. But again, there's all that kind of stuff out there. So we're always looking for that and trying to protect people against that.
Okay.
So is it because I have heard of something that's like out-of-state companies will look and see who is behind on their taxes, and then they'll pay off their taxes. Is that the same thing or no?
Yeah. So that's a thing in Georgia, buying tax deeds. That's probably a whole.
Is it just in Georgia? Or it's
every state. Georgia has there's different rules and laws in every state. Georgia gets a little complicated because you have to file a quiet title action, and that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah. But they make it a little bit more difficult for someone to take ownership of your property, is basically what you're saying.
Right.
Or is it easier in Georgia?
The technical, so you've got a year in Georgia to redeem the property, and if you don't redeem it, then, but the tax deed purchaser has to, sorry. I knew that was going to happen.
It's okay.
Anyways, the tax deed purchaser has to file a lawsuit called a quiet title action to have get a declaratory judgment stating that they do own that property fully, I guess, be simple. So it can get a little complicated on the tax sales. For sure.
And Chris, I think I have 2 more questions.
No, you're fine.
And okay, you mentioned earlier in our conversation an escrow account. Sure. So a lot of our, let's say for us, it's second nature. We, earnest money and escrow accounts, but what is an escrow account? So that, why is it that when we go under contract, generally, the attorneys hold escrow, which, the earnest money in escrow. Yeah. And what does it mean for the buyer? How are they protected?
Right. The word escrow gets thrown around a lot in our business. So, technically it's an escrow account is any account where you're holding money on behalf of somebody else, right? And then you owe certain responsibilities to take care of, fiduciary responsibilities to take care of that money. So that's in y'all's code of ethics. That's in my state bar. So the escrow account is where we hold lender proceeds. If we're holding the earnest money, we hold the earnest money there. But it's, it's a place to guarantee the safe. Again, that's part of, what we do for our role really is we're the guardians of money. And so the escrow account, the state bar rules regulate the heck out of us on those. I get audited every year by 5 or 6 different title companies. We have daily reconciliations of that, so I get a report every day if something's out of whack. So the escrow account is for the state bar, that's the most important thing we do, right? Is protecting the money or any assets of other people. Then there's escrow in California. The closing process is called escrow. The escrow account for your taxes and insurance on your loan. But for us, and you guys too, it's y'all hold earnest money too, and rent deposits and things like that. But we are governed by guidelines of our professions that the public can trust. That we won't do anything bad. We will take care of their...
And so how are the buyers and the sellers protect? How is that protected, or how is it that, let's say, a transaction falls through and you guys decide who is the person who gets the money?
Right. So the purchase and sale agreement then dictates the terms of us holding that earnest money in the escrow account. So depending on who breached the transaction, us as the escrow holder, another use of the term, we make that determination in certain circumstances. So and that's where us being attorneys is different than other states. So we can interpret contracts and they can trust our decisions, and again, there's some liability releases and stuff built into there, but the contract dictates the terms, and so buyers and sellers can, everybody knows if you breach if you breach the contract, then you lose that earnest money, and we have to make that determination. And it's pretty simple analysis. You look at the 4 corners of the contract. So being attorneys, we're pretty good at that.
Yeah. So for those of you who have not been explained how it works, is in every contract when you are going to purchase a property or you're selling your property, the what the process of being under contract means a physical contract that states there's certain contingency periods. So there's a contingency period for your inspection, there's a contingency period for financial and for appraisal. And within those contingencies, the buyer with right cause can come out of that contract and take their money back. But if it's after that contingency period, then you are, as a buyer, in huge fault, where it's protecting the seller for, let's say, if the buyer decides that they no longer want the property 2 days before closing, the seller has taken this property off the market for you for about a month, so it protects them. And so at that point, the seller would get the earnest money, from my experience.
Right, yeah, and so then if we were holding the earnest money, we would make that determination, right? So we would get the termination from both. Where it gets a little sticky is when the two parties don't agree on how to disperse the earnest money, and that's I guess what I was describing before was we have the contract builds that process into it. So it's a 10-day letter process where we would make our determination, send it out to the parties, they get a chance to object, but ultimately we get to make the decision. If we're not comfortable with the decision or not sure, again, the contract controls it, we can interplead that into the court. We've done that 6 or 8 times, and then the buyer and seller can go fight it out in court, and the court holds the proceeds in an escrow account under an agreement. So yes,
all of that sounds so fun.
Yes.
Yeah. No.
It's like, who do I have to go pay a court?
Right.
Just kidding.
No.
Okay. Well, Chris, we want to thank you so much.
I can't thank you guys
for coming out here and on your busy schedule and taking some time to speak with us.
Yes,
thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate it.
If you would, if you want to let our viewers know your social media, where they can find you, if there's your other agents who are colleagues. Guys, we highly recommend Parkway Law. Honestly, they are amazing. Outside of Chris being amazing, his whole team is. But yes. So.
No, thank you. I appreciate all that. I guess the commercial part, yes. Our web address is parkwaylawgroup.com. I think you can search us on Instagram and Facebook. I'm not good at that stuff. I'm good at what I do at the closing table. But Amanda, our business development person, handles all of that. So follow us on Facebook and Instagram. I think TikTok. We'll probably do YouTube now that I'm seeing how much fun this is. I can do this a lot.
Yes.
You don't have to pay me to go talk.
And that's why we started. She talks very little. I talk a lot, and I'm usually the one talking a lot anyway. So I'm like, we might as well record it.
Right? Yeah. Exactly. So I definitely appreciate the opportunity and spread the word, and we love doing good work for good people and clients like you guys. So.
Thank you so much, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
And thank you guys for tuning in today, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.